There's a 1916 silent film, Australian silent film called Mutiny of the Bounty.
My research area is in emerging technology, where I hold the Canada Research Chair.
Expo was an amazing historical experiment. Reimagine cinema.
Okay, hello everybody. So first of all, how many of you have seen Mutiny on the Bounty? Anybody? Any version of it? Not you, Simon? You haven't? How many of you have still have VHS players? I think some of you do. Yeah? So about 10% of the room. What is your favorite Hitchcock movie? Anybody? Which one? Vertigo. Okay, but you have VHS. You do not have VHS. Well, Spellbound is your favorite movie, so I'm going to give you that afterwards. The Bird Award will be co-presented with UofT, Victoria University, and joining us will be Dr. Rhonda McEwen. Mutiny of the Bounty happens to be one of my favorite movies. And coincidentally, over the last 10 years or so, I've met Graeme Ferguson in 2013, and so I was surprised to find out that that was one of his favorite movies. I have every version of Mutiny on the Bounty, including the Laserdisc. There's a 1916 silent film, Australian silent film called Mutiny of the Bounty. There's a 1933 film starring Errol Flynn. It was actually his feature film debut. It was called In the Wake of the Bounty. It's terrible. It's not very good at all. 1935 one is probably the best, in my opinion. It is the least accurate, but it is probably the best. It's the most entertaining. And I think because maybe it paints it in a very sort of black and white, good and bad and evil. But the reality is a lot more complex. So this 1935, Mutiny on the Bounty wins Best Picture of the year, directed by Frank Lloyd. 1962 is directed by Carol Reed and Lewis Milestone. Marlon Brando had Carol Reed fired, and Milestone replaced him. But the most accurate is the 1984 version by Roger Donaldson, which is called The Bounty, which I've watched several times. And it has all those shades of gray. You know, you don't exactly have a villain, you don't exactly have a hero. A little bit about Mutiny on the Bounty before we get to Graeme Ferguson and sort of marrying those two ideas. So we are celebrating Graeme Ferguson tonight, and we're also celebrating Mutiny on the Bounty. And honestly, I programmed this about a year ago. On my birthday. I forgot it's my birthday today. So I programmed this on my birthday. So a bit about Mutiny on the Bounty. By the way, at the beginning of the film, when you start watching it, you'll find, well, if you look really hard, I've been looking for years and I have not found him, but James Cagney is at the beginning of the film. He had a contract dispute, and he said to the director, Frank Lloyd, you know what, I'm not doing anything. He was sailing his boat, and he said, why don't you just put me in the film? I'll just dress up as a sailor, right? So he's actually in the film. I've never been able to spot him. Leslie, have you?
They say he's there.
They say he's there, but I don't know where he is. You'll also find David Niven in the film and a bunch of other people that are in the background for whatever reason. The story of Mutiny on the Bounty, why it fascinates me is because it's sort of it's a microcosm of the world, you know? It's this idea of, you know, taking the law with you. You go on this boat into the middle of the nowhere. You have no law backing you up. You have no way to enforce anything, really. You're telling a bunch of sailors for 2 years what to do. Why would they listen to you? How do you enforce it? Why don't they just throw you into the sea? Why are they going to take your whips and blows? Why would they do that? So it's this idea, it's this microcosm of society, and, you know, how does it sustain itself? So Captain Bligh, he was really Lieutenant Bligh. They called him captain for the sake of this voyage, but he was really lieutenant. And he sort of started more or less from humble beginnings, and much of the admiralty at that time were sort of, you know, well-to-do people. You know, they came from pedigree, etc., but Bligh was not. He was sort of a working man. He kind of worked his way up. And Fletcher Christian happened to be his friend, the guy who does the mutiny, who you'll be seeing. Their relationship is really sort of complex. So Fletcher Christian, he came from a family of note, but the family lost all their money. By the time Fletcher was older, his older brothers had spent all the money. And so they had the title and the position, but they didn't have any money. So Fletcher had to go be a sailor, which is probably not the first thing you wanted to do. And the relationship with Bly has always been sort of a tenuous one. And whatever that relationship was, people couldn't quite figure out. There's some scholars who think that Fletcher Christian had some form of borderline personality disorder, but all the men seemed to like him on board the ship. And I think maybe there was something also about him taking orders from somebody who was not of his class, which probably led to the mutiny. Additionally, his brother a few years before was involved in a mutiny. So the idea of the movie is like, here's a really harsh guy who was, taskmaster. He whipped people into position, and the people revolted. Well, that's like half true. Okay, Bly would actually whip people probably the least in most of the British fleet, but he was really anal about cleanliness, because apparently being clean on those boats or being dirty on those boats would lead to illness for many of the sailors, okay? And many would die just simply because of whatever sort of disease was on board the ship. And so people think it was because of his discipline or his madness or whatever it was, but it really boils down to this, is that he was all about the job, right? He goes, England was having a difficult time because apparently the enslaved in the Caribbean, and they realized that feeding the slaves was too expensive. So they thought that breadfruit would be a cheaper alternative. So what did they do? England sends a ship out to go to Tahiti to get some breadfruit, and they would use that as a cheap form of food to feed the slaves in the West Indies. Okay. What really happened is the ship goes to Tahiti, they get a bunch of breadfruit. There was a lot of discipline on board the ship before. There's 5 months where these boys are, 23-year-olds are sort of lounging around. They have all this food they can eat. Women with white teeth, whereas women in England had brown teeth or no teeth at all at that time. And they were having a good time. All the sex that they could have, all the food that they could have. And so 5 months later, Bly says, all right, we got to get back on the ship. And they draggingly, go back onto the ship, and for 2 weeks, and then there's a mutiny. Graeme Ferguson was an artist, filmmaker, writer, co-founder of IMAX Corporation, and co-inventor of the IMAX experience. He passed away at the age of 91 on May 8th, 2021, 8 weeks after the death of his beloved wife, Phyllis. Born in Toronto, Graeme was the oldest of 4 children, Frank and Grace Ferguson, who were originally from Saskatchewan. Graeme grew up in Galt, Ontario. 2 of Graeme's best friends at Galt's GCI, Robert Kerr and William Shaw, would play instrumental roles in Graeme's life, as did Roman Kreuter, who he met in the summer of 1950, while both were interns at the National Film Board. During his career, Graeme's talents as a cinematographer and director, his enthusiasm for exploration and adventure, and his deep interest in the cultures and politics of the world led him to Ghana, Nigeria, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then to India, where he lived for 2 years. In his early years in New York, he was involved with experimental films and the new form of documentary filmmaking, cinema verite, which had a lasting impact on his own filmmaking style. At Expo 67, he and Roman Kreuter, by then his brother-in-law, had 2 of the most popular pavilions at the fair. Audiences waited in line for hours to see Graeme's Polar Life and Roman's Labyrinth. Both pavilions required multiple projectors, which had to be mechanically synchronized. Graeme and Roman envisioned a movie theater with a similar immersive experience, but with 1 giant screen and 1 projector. To pursue this dream, they formed a company with Robert Kerr, soon joined by engineer William Shaw and later Bill Bruckelman. The first IMAX camera and IMAX projector were built in time to premiere Roman's Tiger Child at Expo 78 in Osaka, Japan. His film North of Superior is the first film to be shot entirely in IMAX, filmed and directed by Graeme for Ontario Place in 71. And of course, Dr. Rhonda McEwen, who's the president and vice chancellor of Victoria University. Dr. McEwen is going to say a couple of words.
Thank you, Powys. And happy birthday to you, Powys.
Thank you.
So I am Rhonda McEwen. I'm president and vice chancellor at Victoria University, which is home to Victoria College. So those of you that know the college will know, or may not have known, that Graeme Ferguson was a student at Victoria College from 1949 to 1952. And so I did ask our wonderful librarians to dig me up some stuff, whatever's in the archives that we may not have known. Some of you may know this, some of you may not. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that we found out. So they said, there are many references about Graeme and photos in the UofT yearbook called Torontonensis. So if you don't know, that's what it was called. And if you want to find some of these photos, may I encourage you to go to the E.J. Pratt Library, because apparently they have a nice little collection going. So this is some of what they shared with me, though. They said on page 327 of the 1949 yearbook, there's mention of Graeme as a cameraman for a film produced by the UofT Film Society. We are guessing 1949 or 1948. Then in 1950, on page 255, there's a brief description of the UofT Film Society's activities and a group photo of the Student Society Club where Graeme is in the front row. There we go. Oh, wait, is this? Aha, wait a minute. Oh, no problem. So good to have you here. Alice did an amazing job receiving. Okay, so then, now it seems like Graeme enjoyed being part of the yearbook, because the next year, 1951, there is a photo of Graeme as part of a group photo again, but this time of the Victoria College Student Union, which is our student government, and he's listed as being in charge of publicity. So we see a trend running here. And then in 1952, Graeme appears in a group photo again of the college union exec, and he is, and they say better yet, he was one of Victoria's stick winners for 1952. Now, I'm not clear on what a stick winner is, but it sounds fascinating. You do know.
I'll tell you a little bit about what the big stick is.
Okay, wait. Hold on. I'm going to put you on the mic next. I want to say that the history, there are many little other pieces that they sent me. There were many things to say about Graeme as a student. One of the things I wanted to share, that just today the Vic Express came out, which is our online magazine, and in it there's a student called Eden Prosser, and she's a fourth-year student at Victoria College. She's double majoring in neuroscience and psychology, but she's doing a minor in creative expression in society, which is one of our Vic 1 programs. And she said that she was inspired to think more creatively about her studies and to cultivate all of her interests in her time at Vic. She is now empowered to plan a bright future in the film industry as a screenwriter. And so I just wanted to say, you know, we talk about some of these amazing Victorians who came and went, like Graeme, and yet the legacy continues on even into a fourth-year student today. I myself, my research area is in emerging technology, where I hold the Canada Research Chair in Tactile Interfaces, Communication and Cognition. And right now I do a lot of work in virtual reality. So it was a special honor for Powys to invite me here to speak a little bit about Graeme Ferguson, because it was the work that was done so long ago, really that culminated in IMAX, that Graeme is co-creator of. That, and I want to just give you a little piece of a conversation that aired on As It Happens on CBC in 2021. But there's just a great little line here, or a piece from Graeme that I wanted to share with you. And this interview was done in 1987 when he spoke with Stan Carew on Primetime about the 20th anniversary of IMAX. So this is what Graeme said then. Mostly, the characteristic of the medium is that it takes you someplace that you'd like to go or dream of going, or maybe might be afraid of going, but that is very difficult for you to go. It's very difficult to go to space. It's very difficult for many people to go underwater, to become divers. It's very difficult for people to, say, fly along a treetop level in a helicopter. It's difficult to be in a forest fire, as we are north of Superior. And so we are, in a way, I guess, in cinema, we do what Life magazine did when it first came out. It really takes you into the world through the direct experience of your eyes. And, you know, that resonated with me in particular, because a lot of the work I do in VR and in immersive spaces follows along that same tradition of taking people into places that they would never go. I have students right now inside a gene, working with genes and transcription and proteins, and that's not a place that we can easily go. Thank him for a division that stems from science into cinema and everywhere else from there. And so that's my little thank you. From Victoria University and Victoria College, we are extremely proud that Graeme was one of our students, and we continue to really pay forward that legacy. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to invite Dr. Janine up, and Munro Ferguson, please. Big hand for both. She holds the York Research Chair in Media Arts and Community Engagement. She is the author of Ecstatic Worlds, Media Utopias, Ecologies. Her recent co-edited collections include the Oxford Handbook of Canadian Cinema and Process Cinema, Handmade Film in the Digital Age, and Reimagine in Cinema, Film at Expo 67. She's a principal investigator for the research project, The Early History of IMAX Films in Architecture. This is Janine's book. I urge you to all get it. Graeme Ferguson's son Munro studied painting and drawing at Banff and philosophy at University of Toronto. In 1984, Munro created Eureka, a comic strip about science, which was syndicated in over 30 newspapers internationally. In 1994, he joined the NFB's English program animation studio, where he wrote, directed, and animated numerous films, including Falling in Love Again, winner of the 2004 Genie Award for Best Animated Short. He has also created VR experiences, dome films, and installations. A big hand for both our guests tonight, please. Great to have both of you here. So, let's start with, I think I want to start with Janine, because I've never asked you this, but I've always been curious about where your interest, both in, giant screen or Expo 67 or Graeme Ferguson came from. Which came first? Was it the interest in Expo and then Graeme, or the other way around? How did that work?
Well, I've been interested in cinema as an experience, cinema as a sense of collective wonder. So, Expo was an amazing historical experiment, and brought all these filmmakers together and asked them to reimagine cinema. And so I was working with Monica Gagnon at Concordia University, Seth Feldman, my colleague at York. And so we said, okay, let's study those film experiments at Expo. And one of them was Polar Life, one of the films that Graeme, 11-screen, turntable, crazy film. And also Labyrinth, which Roman Kreuter and Colin Lowe produced, which was an immersive in situ form of cinema. So very, very exciting experiments. And we were trying to locate the elements of those films, and we interviewed the filmmakers. And then learned this is the genesis of IMAX, a Canadian invention. And then we met Graeme, and that it was, Graeme is truly an extraordinary filmmaker. He's an extraordinary person, but he is really an extraordinary filmmaker.
He really, really is. I think the thing that captivated me about him was he still had that inquisitive mind, even well into his 80s. And I think he had expressed that probably that came from his parents, who were teachers, who were both teachers. And it's possible that may have been the reason that he was so curious about the world. Is that possible, Munro?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. No, he grew up with a lifelong love of books. I think his first love was books. I think I think the first books he ever fell in love with were Swallows and Amazons, which is all about people messing around in wooden boats. This is part of the reason why tonight's film is one of his favorite films, is because it has a lot of wooden boats in it.
Yes.
I do remember that seeing him projecting Mutiny on the Bounty, 1935 version of Mutiny on the Bounty, must have been, it was in New York, so it must have been like around 6 or 7 years old, 8 years old, something like that. And on a 60 millimeter projector, we watched it, and I remember being terrified of the flogging scenes. But other than that, otherwise, it's a great film.
The
I
flogging
think he
thing.
would have been very pleased by both of the award, thank you, and the choice of this film. You know, he was lucky enough to have Northrop Frye and Harold Innis as professors. He studied a lot under Harold Innis, so it's very appropriate that we're here
Innis College.
at Innis College
Yes.
tonight. And he also knew Marshall McLuhan. And so U of T in those days, there's a lot of intellectual interest in communication studies in the 1950s. Pam later became president of the university, was somebody he met riding on an elephant in India shortly after university. It wasn't when he was a child. But yeah, he really became immersed in a really interesting theoretical framework regarding communications and information theory, which is actually perfect intellectual training for somebody who was, in the end, going to invent a new medium. So, you know, thank you, University of Toronto, for giving my father a love of education and a love of media and a deep understanding of that, because it really prepared him well.